Now, there's a parable that I've taken from David Bales and Ted Orland's book, Art and Fear. And it talks about a ceramics class. And the teacher broke the students into two groups. And he said, okay, so this group over here, group A, you're going to focus on quantity. And in order to get an A for this class, you need to produce enough. And I'm going to judge your output on weight. So an A will be, 50 kilos, a B will be 35 kilos, and so forth. And this group over here, the way that you're going to achieve an A is by creating the most perfect looking pot. And so what happened was he broke the two groups in, and the group that was focused on quantity actually ended up producing the most beautiful looking pot. Whereas the other group that was focused on quality really struggled to even get a pot up and going. And I'll tell you why that happens. So when you're focused on quantity, as long as there's iteration in the process, which is what happened with the quantity group, they looked at the pot and then they kind of iterated as they went and kept producing pot, iterated. And so in the end, they produced the highest quality pot, even though that wasn't the expected outcome. Whereas the quality group was almost navel gazing, so wedded on how they were going to go about it, designing the most perfect pot, that they never even got one pot produced. So the reason I tell you that story is because that's the same with our sales team, and it can be the same with us. Sometimes we're the biggest inhibitor to activity because we start to think about, well, who's our avatar? Who's our customer avatar? Who do we need to be going out to see? Okay, so how are we going to design our territories? Have we got our marketing in place? Rather than getting people out there used to having conversations, and the more conversations that they're having, even if it's not necessarily with the right people, you get them into a cadence of behavior that then you can iterate. So then you can work on the quality, and then you've got both. So if we're going to set our sales teams up with the right levels of activity, we need to get them focused on the right levels of activity so that they're not just focused on busy work. Now, one way to do it is like this, and this is how many organizations start to do it. So they start with a new business target. So this is not including, growth from existing customers. I'm just talking about brand new business. And that might be our sales target there, $1.2 million. And then we'll say, okay, well, what's the average customer spend? So we'll go, okay, well, we'll do those sums. Oh, it's about $60,000. Okay, well, if that's the case, then, we need 20 of those customers to come through. So that's going to be our number of new customers for this year. And they say, okay, well, if I've got a conversion rate of about 30%, how many people do I need to be meeting with in a year? Well, around about that amount, 60 to 66%. If it's a third, or 33.3333 reoccurring. And then they say, okay, so let's break that down over 10 months. And that's 10, 11 months. That's about 6 meetings a month. Well, what that will get you is not your actual target, because what it doesn't take into account is it doesn't take into account sales cycles. How long it takes from the time that you meet with somebody to the time that they become a paying customer, number one. It doesn't take into account peak or dead zones. So before we started this workshop, we were talking about April and what a challenge April is. You've got Easter right in the middle of it, then quickly followed on by Anzac Day. And if any of you deal with Queensland, well, apparently there's a Labor Day holiday mixed in. So April would be one of those months where it's unfair to really expect, prospective customers to be making decisions, because a lot of them are going to be away, and a lot of our own sales team might be away as well. Then we've got different levels of customer spend. So even though that's an average across all of our customers, we've got different levels of customers. So some customers might spend 100,000, some customers might only spend 25,000, and some customers might spend something in between that. So how are we categorizing customers? Because within each of those categories, there's nuances, there's sales cycles for each of those categories, and there's a way of engaging for each of those different customer categories as well. So this is one of the ways in which, you know, an inexperienced sales leader might set targets for their team and then wonder why they're not actually producing results. So let me show you a different way of doing it. The first thing that we need to focus on is we need to get our teams aware of what high value activity is rather than busy work, because that's not what we're after. You know, we can see people out there, we can see people busy, we can see filled calendars. But when we come together on a weekly basis to have our sales team meetings, our focus really needs to be on what we're trying to get them to do, which is, first of all, get them focused on the ready to close opportunities, because that's where our revenue is going to come into play. So do we know that? Have we got a sales pipeline that's transparent enough for us to identify clearly who those ready to close opportunities are? And then what are those strategies that they're going to employ in order to close those opportunities? And are we using the strength of our sales team in order to do just that? Have we got then more into the pipeline? So some people don't even think about the value of their total pipeline. At any given time, it needs to be a multiple of what our conversion rate is, times the target. So if we've got a 30% conversion rate, then our total pipeline value all the time needs to be 3.6 if we're using the example there before of 1.2 as our annual sales target. And that ensures that you've got enough of a buffer in there to accommodate for all of that, you know, decision-making inertia, for sales cycles, for people being away, lost momentum, everything in between. So that's the other thing. And then the other high value activity is progressing opportunities along the sales pipeline. So what do they now need to do? Once we've got people in the pipeline, what do we need them to do to progress them along towards being ready to close? What a lot of sales teams, salespeople, we can even be guilty of, if we don't have this rigor attached to what it is that we're doing, is we look at shiny objects. And salespeople are notorious for being, you know, shiny object, and they lose momentum on the things that are actually going to enable the business to generate revenue. They also focus on happy chats, that, you know, they've got their favorite people that they go and meet with. But that might not also result in sales. So they make them feel good, and therefore that's what they're more likely to do and spend time with those people, but it's actually not necessarily going to win you work. Or they prioritize opportunities that may or may not ever happen over those that are already in the pipeline. So we need to get them focused on high value activity over low value activity. And this is where our sales team meetings comes into play, because we need to have that rigor to keep them accountable and to keep them focused on what those high value activities are.